Hello and welcome to another episode of Thick Slices and Deep Cuts. This evening's show, I will be talking about the classic progressive rockers, space rockers, NEKTAR. So NEKTAR were one of these 70s prog rock bands. They were right there in that heart of it, the early to mid 70s. In fact, they were around, all of the 70s and into the early 80s. Before taking a long, nearly 20-year hiatus, but they are still going as of today. They've rebooted as of, I think, 2001. I am going to rank the classic era. So I am going to rank their beginning, their first album that came out in 71 through I believe their 8th album that came out in 1980. So they formed, I think, in 1969, and they started out as just a total space rock band, and you can hear this song right here is from their very first album. It's very out there. It's probably their heaviest, darkest thing was their very first album. And then they evolved, they're considered a space rock, prog rock band, but they definitely evolved into a progressive rock band during the early to mid 70s. And then as the 70s started to wind down and we went into a new decade, they had a lot of the same issues that a lot of these classic progressive rock bands had, which was that you're on your 7th, 8th album, you've done a lot of great things, what can you do next? How can you change to fit the new styles of the times? So they have that commonality with a lot of bands in this genre, and that came around during this time. They have put out, I think, 15 overall. When you count on Prog Archives, there's a covers album that they count, and then there's a version of the band called New Nectar, and they count that. So if you count those two things, they have 15 total. I'm just going to focus on their first 8 from 71 to 80, and talk a little bit about what they've been doing ever since. But for the most part, I think most people would agree that the early stuff is the classic stuff. So good news, I have physical copies of all of these 8 albums. So we'll just go ahead and get into it here. I knew like my bottom 2. I knew my number 8 and I knew my number 7, but the top 6, I guess I knew what my number 1 was, but really once you get to the top 6, I would just say these are all essential. So it was really tough to try and figure out what should be number 6 and what's number 4 or 3. It was a similar issue I kind of have with like Black Sabbath. The first 6 are great. The 2 that came out after that in the late 70s aren't as classic, but they're still worth listening to. They're still good. Same thing with Led Zeppelin. The first 6 are great. The final 2 are not by any means terrible, but they're not on that level as the first 6. And I feel like NEKTAR is from that same basic era, and they've got that same quality. And so based on that, we'll start the ranking, and based on that, you probably have a pretty good hint as to what my numbers 8 and 7 might be. But so here we go. Coming in at number 8, and I'll take this out of the sleeve, but I'm going with their 7th album from 1977. So this is Magic is a Child. That's the name of the album, Magic is a Child. Apparently, that's Brooke Shields as a teenager on the cover. So this is the first time in their career where they put out 6 albums in 4 or 5 years. And Roy Albrighton, the main vocalist and the guitar player for the band for many years, he's left the band at this point. So it's their first lineup change, and they bring in Dave Nelson on guitars and vocals, but he only sings on like 3 tracks, the lead vocals. So Ron Howden, the drummer, is doing a lot of the vocals on here. I think Derek Mo Moore, the bass player, I think he's doing some vocals as well here. Alan Freeman, Taft Freeman is their keyboard player. Also, they're basically a 4-piece band, but if you see band photos of a 5th guy, Mick Brockett was their light guy, and he was kind of like a band member. So if you see pictures of them with 4, those are the 4 musicians. If you see pictures of them as a 5-piece, that's because Mick Brockett, the light guy, is in the band photo. Anyway, so this album, this is 1977, late 77. Times are changing. Their popularity, I don't know what their album sales were like, but I feel like their popularity may have been waning a little bit. So there's pressure here. This is on Polydor, so it's a major label. There's pressure to come up with some hits. You may be a prog band, but you need some hits. So it starts with Away from Asgard. I don't know, the vocals sound different. It sounds a little uppity, like upbeat, poppy, happy. It's not terrible, but it's not what I'm looking for when I listen to Nektar. Magic as a Child is like a Beatle-esque one with no drums. It's okay, but it sounds like them trying to do a Beatles song, and it doesn't sound like classic Nektar, although it's 77, you've had a lineup change, and you've got to try something different at some point. Then it just gets kind of Eerie Lackawanna is probably my least favorite. These songs are just kind of forgettable. It's usually the case with a lot of this. You just get a lot of songs that just don't do anything. Like, they may not be terrible, but they're not good either, and they're just totally forgettable. And your mind wanders to, did I pay all the bills? Your mind just starts to wander when those songs come on. The second side is better. Train from Nowhere is kind of like, it has this really cool augmented kind of angular riff to open it, and then it gets kind of catchy and poppy, but then that angular riff comes back in the middle, and what's his name? Well, Robert Fripp does a guest solo on that. It's a great guest solo by Fripp, but he goes by the name of, where is it? Walt, no, I can't find it on here. Walt Nektroid, so he goes by an alias of Walt Nektroid, but it's Robert Fripp does a really nice solo in the middle of that song. Kind of saves the song. The best song on here is a song called Listen. Dave Nelson gets to sing lead vocals on it, and he sounds better than Ron Howden and probably Mo Moore, but he sounds good, and his guitar playing shines on here. He's got this big, like, Gary Moore, David Gilmour-y kind of guitar with delay on it. That's the best song on here is Listen. That one is good. On the Run is okay. Spread Your Wings is okay to finish it. The lyrics are kind of cheesy, but if you can kind of ignore the cheesy lyrics, it's okay. So Train from Nowhere has the one riff with the Fripp solo. Listen is by far the best thing on here. And Spread Your Wings is okay. I guess Away from Asgard is the one you'll see on the compilations. The title track isn't terrible, but this is easily, when I put this ranking together, it was pretty easy that this was going to come in at number 8. And I think in looking at Prog Archives, which again, I don't base my ratings on them, but I am curious to see what that general consensus is compared to mine. And they had this, of the ones I'm ranking, they had this one ranked the lowest too. So there you go. Coming in at number 8, their 7th album from 77, their first without Roy Albrighton, Magic is a Child. Okay, moving on. Number 7, now we're switching decades. We're going to 1980, and this is their 8th album. The last one that I'll be chronologically that I'll be reviewing here, but this is the one. So they have a gap of about 2 years between albums, and then this comes out with a lineup change. Now you move from 77 to 80, so you're talking 2.5, 3 years between these albums. The band went through a lot of lineup changes in about 78, and so Roy Albrighton comes back into the band. Thankfully, it's tough to have Nektar without Roy. So he comes back in as your vocalist, which is key, and your guitar player. So you get your familiar voice back in more ways than one. And Taft Freeman is still on keyboards, but at this point now, Ron Howden is no longer in as the drummer. On this album, he's kind of singing a lot and driving the ship. The next album, he's gone. And Derek Mo Moore is not your bass player here either. So whereas here you had one massive lineup change, well here you've got Roy back, but you've got 2 original members gone. And it's 1980, and the songs are, this is still fairly well produced. I mean, they had Rupert Hine, who later did Rush albums, come in here and help with one song of production. But for the most part, Too Young to Die is okay to start. It's not great, and it sounds a little like you're in a different decade. It doesn't sound super 70s at this point. Angel is okay. Telephone is not bad for kind of a ballad. The first side's all right. You flip to the other side. Can't Stop You Now, You're Alone. I don't know. Those songs are all, again, that's the forgettable spot on this album. I think this album starts fairly strong and it ends strong. The best track on here, Man in the Moon, the title track is really good. It's dark and moody, and the longest song, I think it's like 6.5 minutes long. So it does have Man in the Moon, the title track, which is cool. I think Telephone is okay. I think Too Young to Die is all right. It's okay. It doesn't make me cringe as much as this one. Just has a lot of like completely forgettable cringe-worthy moments. This one sounds a little bit more like Nectar, albeit 1980. And this is the first album that Roy's on since 75. Now you're in 1980. So things are just different. The magic of the first 6, that I've yet to review any of those, the magic of the first 6 is pretty much long gone here. And so they put this album out, lineup changes galore. I think even more lineup changes as they toured for this and stuck around until 1982 when they officially split for 19 years. And it would be over 20 years before the next studio album would be released after this. But this one is okay. It's all right. I can find things on it that I like. If I had to put a compilation together, I could plug the title track and maybe 1 or 2 others off that. But there you go. So coming in at number 7, their 8th album from 1980, and their last one for almost 2 decades. I've got, in fact, their last one for 21 years, but I've got Man on the Moon. All right. Enough about those. We're getting to the original 6 albums, all put out in 71, 72, 2 in 73, 74, 75. And so whatever I rank 6th here, I would just tell you these are all pretty essential. Like, it's tough to rank these at this point. Again, I kind of know my number 1, but outside of that. So we'll just get into it, and I'll try and justify why I'm ranking things number 6. And so at number 6, I've got their 3rd album from 1973. It's called Sounds Like This. It is a double album. Well, I have a double CD because I've got bonus material, but it was a double vinyl album. It's like 74 minutes long. And this album is different from the other albums that they did during this time in that it's not really progressive. They did these songs live in the studio to capture that live, raw feeling. And it sounds like it. So there's not a ton of atmosphere on here. It's pretty much just guitars and drums and just throwing down and bluesy, heavy bluesy riffs. It kind of reminds me of like Uriah Heep or something like that from 73, from this era, from the early 70s. Maybe a little more obviously proggy. And I used to not like this album that much, but in reviewing for this ranking, I listened to this one probably the most. I like this album. I don't know why I was down on it before. I think the thing here is, yeah, it's not overly progressive and atmospheric, but it's still got lots of cool riffs, and it's got good energy. And Roy Albright, if you ever wonder how good of a guitar player he is, he's just throwing down all over this album. I think on other albums he's more subdued because he's trying to be creative or atmospheric or play for a concept, whereas on here he's just throwing down riff after riff. So my favorite song on here that we already heard is Cast Your Fate. That is the one that kind of has the moody atmosphere. But, Good Day starts it out. It's catchy. They play it a lot live. New Day Dawning's okay. They sneak in a George Harrison or Norwegian Wood. They throw in that. What you gonna do? 1, 2, 3, 4 is cool. It's probably too long. I think it's like 12 minutes or something. Do You Believe in Magic? Cast Your Fate. A Day in the Life of a Preacher is probably my favorite jam on here, and that one's probably the longest. The second longest track, I think it's like 13 minutes long. But you get to, Wings is a short song. I don't know. Odyssey is like the longest song, and I'm not sure. I hear people all the time go, well, that album would have been better if they would have had less songs and shortened it. And I'm usually like, well, why would you root for your favorite bands to shorten albums? They're just giving you more material. However, in this instance, I do think if they reduced this from like 74 to maybe 45 minutes and gotten it onto one album, and they cut out some of the super extended jams and just got things a little more concise here, this album would probably be an even better listen. And then they could do these long extended jams live. But I think that was the point. This is live in the studio, so that's why these songs are super long. And not every single song I love, but I don't think anything on here is necessarily bad. It's just a little long-winded, a little bit of bluesy jamming here and there. But again, Cast Your Fate, A Day in the Life of a Preacher, probably the two for me that stand out. I think 1, 2, 3, 4 is all right. Good Day, New Day Dawning. The band likes this. They play all these songs live. If you follow all their live stuff, you can find every one of these songs played live multiple times. So that's my justification for this coming in at number 6, is just that it's maybe one of the early albums where I'm kind of skipping through songs a little bit, or I'm like, after 5 minutes of a song, I can't do the next 7 minutes of jamming. So maybe it could have stood to have a little bit of editing. It's probably their least progressive, their least atmospheric album during this time, but it's still cool. It's the only one like this. I think it's cool. So there you go, coming in at number 6 from '73, their third album, Sounds Like This. All right, trying to figure out why this is 5th, but here we go. Coming in at number 5, this would be their 5th album. From '74, I've got Down to Earth. So this is a series of 8 songs. I guess there's 9. They have a finale, which is a reprise of an earlier track called Nelly the Elephant, which, by the way, is probably my favorite song on here, and it sounds a little bit like Pink Floyd's Echoes once they get jamming. Once they get to the jam part, it sounds a lot like Pink Floyd's Echoes. But Astral Man comes out. These songs are a little bit shorter, I guess, by their standards. You know, everything's like 3 minutes, 5, 3, 6, 4, 4, 3, 5, and a 1 minute ending. So this is a band that's coming off of just crazy space rock and doing the progressive concept, long songs, and then a huge concept and a double album live in the studio. So they're probably at this point going, okay, 5th album in 4 years. What can we do different this time? So they come out with this strange concept of a circus. These people at the circus, you got Astral Man, you got Nelly the Elephant. Astral Man's kind of catchy. It almost sounds like a ragtime rock and roll song that you're like, kind of like, what is this? I'm looking for atmosphere and progressivism. But it kicks in, and by the time you get to the chorus, you're digging what they're doing. It's creative. Nelly the Elephant, like I said, probably my favorite thing on here. Early Morning Clown's a little mellower, but kind of cool, kind of spacey. That's Life is a good one, good jamming one. Fidgety Queen's a good stomping heavy one. Oh Willie and Little Boy are okay. They're probably the most forgettable tracks on here. Show Me the Way's pretty cool, but again, I think this album's strengths are in the first half for sure. The first 5 tracks. I think Show Me the Way's okay is probably the best thing in the second half of this. And the finale is just a reprise of Nelly the Elephant. So I think this album is cool. It's, again, of these early albums, I think Sounds Like This is probably their least atmospheric and progressive, but that was by design. And I think this one has definitely got some atmosphere and is definitely progressive in ways, but it's probably less so, and maybe that's why I'm trying to justify why I have it 5th. But I like this album. I listen to it plenty, and they do play a lot of these songs live here and there, so most of these songs you can find somewhere in a live setting. So this is another cool album. Down to Earth coming in at number 5, their 5th album from '74. All right, just keeps getting better here. Coming in at number 4, this would be their 6th album and final in this classic run from '75. I've got Recycled. What a wild album cover that is. So this is total prog again. So Recycled, the song, is broken into, I want to say, 7 tracks. It's about 18.5-minute song, broken into 7 tracks, which are cool, and it kind of goes back and forth between some vocal songs and some instrumental passages, and I think Cybernetic Consumption is the 2nd track. So they have the song Recycle that comes in, and they kind of show you the main, I guess they call it the main motif, the vocal, the main melody, and then it goes into Cybernetic Consumption, which is very cool. It's got good synthesizers. And they kind of bounce in and out of like these weird passages and that main theme from Recycle. You know, you got Recycling, Recycle Countdown, so a lot of those recycled parts, they come back in, have similar things. The longest passage is Unendless Imagination, which is the 7th and final part, but all these other tracks are like in the 2-3 minute range. And it's cool, but I would have to say that on the second side, my favorite songs, standalone songs, are Marvelous Moses is good, but the best is the final track called It's All Over. And in some kind of way, the final track of the 6th album from that heyday is called It's All Over, and kind of is somewhat indicative of their history. Not that it was all over, but just like it put a wrap on just this classic phase of NEKTAR, where they pumped out 6 albums in 5 years from '71 to '75, which is right in the heart of great classic progressive music. Oh, and did I mention that they're British? So British prog, although they formed in Germany, that's the strange spelling of the name. So they were 4 or 5 or even 6 Brits going to college in Germany, formed in Germany as Brits. but recorded a lot of their albums in New Jersey. And I think they might be living stateside now, so it's tough to know exactly where they're located, but we'll just say that they're British, with origins in Germany. But yeah, so this is a great album. This is very progressive. If you want Nektar to be progged out, this would be an album for you to check out. It's got the 18.5-minute concept on side 1. It's got Sao Paulo Sunrise and Costa del Sol, which are okay songs. Then Marvelous Moses really picks it up, and It's All Over is a great tune. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of this album as well. There's Roy with a double neck guitar, 1975. And so, you know, after these somewhat straightforward, down to earth, they, you know, once again are like, what can we do different this time? And so on their 6th album, they go here. And I think it's great. So there you go. What do I have this at number 4 from 1975, Recycled. Okay, coming in at number 3. I don't know where to rank this. It's coming in at number 3, but it's the one I listen to the most these days. I'm going all the way back to their debut. From 71, Journey to the Center of the Eye. Their darkest, their weirdest, their most out there, their most space rock by far album. It's just one big concept. The songs all kind of connect. It's 42 minutes of it's kind of nightmarish in spots. Burn Out My Eyes is kind of nightmarish. We heard the Dream Nebula part 1, but we heard the Dream Nebula to start. It's All in the Mind is good. But it's just a dark kind of nightmarish album. If you look closely, I see 6 guys on the back. They had a second light man in the very, very beginning of the band's era. I don't remember his name. It's on here somewhere, but they started out with 6 people in the band photos because they had 2 official light guys, but ultimately they stuck with Mick Brockett. But it's the only one. It's the only one quite like this. Also, the other thing is, I try to find recordings of live recordings of songs from this album. It's hard to find. They don't really play anything like this live. You're lucky to get the Dream Nebula Part 1 or the Dream Nebula Part 1 and 2, and that's about it. But this version of the CD that I got on Purple Pyramid Records, or Cleopatra, they have a bonus disc, and it's them playing this album in its conceptual entirety in 1971. So that's very valuable if you want to hear them play this live. But I just love this album. It's their heaviest, it's their darkest, it's their most spacey, trippy. It sounds like Hawkwind or something. I mean, they sound like, Nektar sounds like nobody else here, but they kind of remind me of some tripped out Hawkwind or some early Tangerine Dream or something like that. But definitely, and this album doesn't really sound like any of the other Nektar albums either. So that's what makes this cool. So when people say, oh yeah, Nektar, they're a space rock band, it's like, if they are, it's because of what they did right in the beginning. Their second album was still a little space rocky, but it was starting to go more into that Yes type prog rock vein. So there you go. Coming in at number 3, an absolute classic. Their debut from 71, Journey to the Center of the Eye. All right, I think these top 2 are their most successful albums. We heard an edit version, a 10-minute edit version of this track. Their 4th album from 73, what a great year for progressive rock. Remember the Future. So this is 2 side-long tracks, but if it weren't for the limitations of vinyl, it just would have been like one 35, 36-minute song. And I do wonder if, Jethro Tull did Thick as a Brick in 72. And they did a Passion Play in 73 as well. And that was basically the same concept. Side-long tracks, basically one big 40-minute thing. And I'm thinking Nektar was influenced by that and did the same sort of format, but did it their way. So that's what this kind of reminds me of in that sense. But this is very, it's got the space rock thing, but this is them just going prog out. Like, how creative can we get with our instruments? How technical, like how layered, how detailed can we get? And it's a cool listen. I don't know why I'm holding up the CD any longer. I've got it on vinyl here. So there's Roy with the hat on. There's Mo Moore with the classic Rickenbacker. That's Ron Howden, Taft Freeman. There's a psychedelic light show in the background, that courtesy of Mick Brockett. So even though he's not on stage with them, his presence is felt there. Great album cover too. I think it was their biggest seller in the States. It might be their most successful album. It could be a lot of people's number one. It's definitely their proggiest thing. So there you go, coming in at number 2 from 73, their 4th album, Remember the Future. Looks like I forgot to show Down to Earth I have on vinyl as well. I'm seeing a lot of photos back there. I think Mick Brockett's in one of those as well. There's the circus. Anyway, yeah, I had Down to Earth on vinyl as well. So coming in at number 1 by process of elimination, and I think this might be the consensus number 1. But I'm going with their second album. We're listening to the title track from it right now from 1972, A Tab in the Ocean. And of course, I have it on vinyl here. Very cool artwork on the back too. Very strange artwork. This is still space rocky in a way, but it's leaning more towards yes. You're doing the sidelong track. So Tab in the Ocean is like a 17-minute song, and then Desolation Valley / Waves is like one 9-minute piece, and then Crying in the Dark, King of Twilight. Crying in the Dark goes into King of Twilight. So it's basically like 2 songs connected to make one 11-minute track. And as a kid, I always knew the song King of Twilight because Iron Maiden covered it. And I had no idea who NEKTAR. I just had heard the name NEKTAR all since I was like 12 or 13 years old. So, but Iron Maiden covered a song from here. I just think this is still cool. It's still got that early, cool, heavy space rock thing. Their second heaviest album, behind Journey to the Center of the Idea. The early NEKTAR has got such a cool charm to it. And so this is just a classic prog rocker from back then. And again, it's got, I don't know if it's technically 5 tracks or what, but it's really 3 tracks. It's this big sidelong piece, which is just what like Yes was doing at the time. Emerson, Lake and Palmer with Tarkus, Yes with Close to the Edge. These sidelong tracks. So they're doing this in 72 because that's what everybody's kind of doing. And then in 73 they're doing a whole 40-minute suite. That's what Jethro Tull was then doing. And before that they were doing just crazy space rock. But just a very cool band that was very indicative of that time on the trends of progressive rock coming out of England. So there you go. At number 1, A Tab in the Ocean, their second album from 72. So quickly to re-rank here, coming in at number 8, I've got their 7th album from 77, Magic as a Child, the one without Roy Albright. At number 7, I've got their 8th album from 1980, Man in the Moon, the one without Ron Howden and Derek Mo Moore. And at number 6, you've got their 3rd album from 73, the big double album live in the studio jam session. Sounds like this. At number 5, you've got another different sort of album by them. In 74, you've got Down to Earth. At number, if I can find it, at number 4, their 6th album, their last in this classic early run from 75, Recycled. At number 3, just a classic debut that sounds nothing like anything else they did, from 71, Journey to the Center of the Eye. And then their 2 big successes. At number 2, from 73, their 4th album, Massive Concept, Remember the Future. And at number 1, and here's again, Remember the Future. And at number 1, their 2nd album from 72, a good blend of heavy, dark space rock and progressive rock, A Tab in the Ocean. One of the first things I ever got from when I got into the band, this was out at the time, NEKTAR Pure, live in Germany, 2005, Rock Palace. So they're big in Germany. But this is such a great, it's Roy Albright and Ron Howden, but they've got Randy Dembo on bass, and they got another guy on keyboards, and I think they have Mick Brockett doing lights because it's got a cool light show. But what an awesome set list. A Tab in the Ocean, The Dream Nebulous, parts 1 and 2, into Desolation Valley and Waves. Remember the Future Part 1 into Remember the Future Part 2, so it's the whole thing all at once. Cast Your Fate from Sounds Like This. The Debate, which was from a new album called Evolution. Show Me the Way from Down to Earth, A Day in the Life of a Preacher, recycled in its entirety. Good Day and Fidgety Queen, and there's an acoustic set on the other side with Telephone from the Man on the Moon album. Kind of cool. This is really good. This is really, you get everything you're looking for right here. Everything's from the first 6 albums except for like one acoustic song and one new song. Also, this is the favorite thing I've heard from them live back in the 70s. Sunday night at the London Roundhouse. It's heavy on A Tab in the Ocean, Sounds Like This, and Remember the Future. And Cast Your Fate, we heard this version, because this is my favorite version of Cast Your Fate. So this is cool. Also, I haven't really listened to a lot of their newer material because it hasn't really, the new stuff doesn't do anything for me. But when they play the old stuff, it still sounds good. But they just released this in 2020, The Other Side. Look at that logo. It's Remember the Future type logo. So Roy Albrighton passed away in 2016. But a lot of this music, and Ron Howden's still in the band. Mo Moore's back. 2 of the guys are back. But they got a guy that was with the band briefly in '78, and he's doing the vocals and guitars. And they do a lot of songs that they had written in '78 that never saw the light of day, because then Ron Howden, a couple of guys left, and Roy came back, and it never saw the light of day. But Devil's Door is a song that you can find on old live recordings that was cool, but it never found it on its way on an album. Well, they take a board recording of studio board recording of Roy Albright, and that's the intro to the song, and then they play the song true to how it sounded back in '74. I'm on Fire, I think Skyrider, those were 2 songs that were written back in '78. It sounds good. It sounds as close to classic NEKTAR as you're going to get. I like it. It's a good album, just for Devil Door alone. Also, there's a live anthology. It's like 5 discs. It's got a set from '74 in the Down to Earth session, a set from '75 during Recycled, and then another set from '76. But it's just everything from those classic early albums, and so that's pretty cool as well, I think. And if you're new to NEKTAR and you don't know where to start, and it seems like it could be expensive, I think they have like an original albums classic where they give you like 5 of the first 6 for like $25, so that might be a place to start. But there you go. So I think I'm out of time, but thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.